And we are back with Rob Alderman. We're talking about anxiety and crisis and how we manage these things. A lot of people have had, I saw people, strong people, just fall apart during COVID.
Yeah.
And it really changed lives. People who I looked at as mentors suddenly became racked with fear,
Yeah.
and then others, like, I think my life actually almost got better. I found a new way to sort of, get to know my neighbors and
Yeah.
and
Sure.
be more community oriented,
Yeah.
in ways I hadn't been before. Started Zoom groups and various things. But what were some of your tools and techniques? I mean, not just with
Sure.
COVID, but getting out of your anxiety. Like, what did you
Sure.
learn?
Yeah. Well, I think specifically technique wise, mindfulness, mindfulness in
Yeah.
every, constantly checking in with yourself and asking, where am I and what am I doing, really?
And we had a Buddhist monk on one of our earlier shows talk about mindfulness, but just to recap, well, how would you describe it? Because it's such a buzzword that sometimes it's used so much people don't really know what it means.
Sure. For me, mindfulness is the very intentional act of taking stock of where I am and what is actually happening. So, in my case, I have crippling anxiety, and I would think I was having a heart attack, and so I had to learn to immediately ask myself, "Does anything hurt?
Mm.
Am I
On the
feeling?
physical level.
Am I feeling a physical pain?" Right. So, in that sense, mindfulness was, I'm here. I feel no pain. If I had if this was a heart attack, I would um, feel pressure in my chest, or I'd feel pain in my arm or in my neck. And then I would move from there to just say, well, it's now been 10 minutes. And if I was having a heart attack, I'd be dead. But I'm
Hmm.
not dead. I'm here, and I'm in this room. Right now I'm in the basement room of our home, and I really feel like not only is that such a fantastic technique for massive panic or massive anxiety, but it's so good for standard navigation of life, is that
Hmm.
99% of our life is nowhere near, like, we're not spending 99% of our time in trauma. Many people have experienced terrible trauma. Many people are experiencing horrible things. But really, for most people, when you add that up, it's a very small amount of our lifetime, but we allow it to affect us so deeply for so long. And
Yeah.
so mindfulness pulls us out of the fear of what might happen, and it
Hmm.
pulls us out of the trauma of what has happened. And it lets us
Right.
live right here,
In the
right.
present moment, which is where the Buddhists say is the only place of peace. The Buddhists say if you're depressed, you're in the past. If you're anxious, you're in the future. So you're echoing the same teaching.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for me too, right? That's when we talked earlier in the earlier segment about, I'm for it, right? Like, I'm for this Buddhist thought, and for me, that's clearly apparent in the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
Jesus says, consider the birds, right? Like, they have food. Consider the flowers, they have rain, right? Um, and he's saying, there's this one part where he says, like, the bird doesn't worry about where it's going to eat. How much more love does the Father have for you,
Yeah.
right? um and uh and so much of the teachings of Christ are along that line of, like, these very grounded, the world says be anxious, but I tell you be at peace. The world says to be angry, but I tell you to love. The world says to this, but I say to this, right? And so I think mindfulness is all through the New Testament, in the actual words of Jesus, and I think through the Old Testament, through kind of the ways that the people lived and the routine that they lived. And
I
uh,
love that.
and so I found myself just more in harmony. When, if you are a Christian, if that is your path, and you really lean in, you will find yourself in agreement with a lot more people than
Mhm.
you thought, right? Like Jesus is mostly saying, love each other, be chill, be kind, live in this moment, you know. And
Yeah.
so that I think, and in COVID, right? I think the people who did the people who did the best, right, were the people who really found ways to maintain their humanity and their
Right.
connected humanity with others. I have a group of guys that I have been in one way or another smoking cigars with regularly for 25 years of my life. Easily,
Yeah.
easily. I mean, people that I knew when I first met you, easy, so easily. I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
a long time. And it was interesting, that group that met on the regular during COVID, we met even more, right?
Hmm.
We didn't meet less. We just went on our back decks, opened our computers, and got our cigars and zoomed in and spent time and in a lot of ways, right? That was even more connective because there was no distractions of the cigar lounge. There were no cars going by. It was just us and the birds and our friends. And I think there's a depth if you can settle yourself into what it really means to be human, right, and embrace that, then it's very very hard to box that in, whether that's
Yeah.
a global pandemic or it's anxiety or it's panic. um, and as I moved out of my own personal panic in life, it was as I embraced the Orthodox faith and this idea of mindfulness. And I learned that from other Anglicans. Right. So there's a
Uh-huh.
community, there's a humanity of people saying, I see you, I see that you're hurting, and be at peace, be here right now with us.
It's got to be a tremendous pressure to have a congregation turning to you. I mean, I know just as a tarot card reader, my clients, sometimes they come to me in all kinds of states of upset and they want me to fix them. And that's not exactly possible. Sometimes I can calm them down, sometimes I can give them a little bit of peace. But I imagine the pressure on you would be way worse.
Yeah, my first night as a pastor, the very first night, I got a call. There was a snowstorm here, and one of the people in my congregation, her father attempted suicide with a shotgun and was in the hospital.
Ooh.
And so, I thought, well, this is the job, and I got in the car and I drove to downtown Chattanooga, and these people I've never met are looking at me saying, what does God have to say about, about this? But I'll say, even then, and I was lucky. I've seen pastors have a real hard time of this, right? There's this terrible, terrible, um, terrible cultural thing, especially in evangelical Christianity, that like the pastor has to be a Superman. Um, and thankfully, that's going away, right? Pastors think that about themselves, but the congregations always knew they were human. you know? And so for me, I was really lucky that my congregation and then later the people at my seminary were so loving and understanding of my brokenness at the time.
I think I saw this a lot with COVID. The people who don't have faith, like I really worry. People who say, nope, don't believe in anything, no higher power. I always tell people, I don't care what you call it. You can say God, you can say source, you can say spirit, you can
Sure,
say
sure.
higher power or even energy. But if you don't believe in anything,
Mhm.
it's a empty, lonely place. And I don't know how they cope.
Yeah, it's hard. I think I've done a lot of I've done a lot of thinking about that. I remember watching. There's this TV show that used to be called I Should Be Dead, and which is not something somebody who's having panic attacks on the regular should watch. But I would watch it. It would be these people who had gotten into these like terrible situations, and um, I remember one where a person was horrifically injured while they were hiking, and probably I think mauled by a bear, and just all these terrible things that had happened. And at some point, he had gotten himself down off this mountain. He was in terrible. He'd like broken his back and his legs were broken. He's having to crawl over rocks. And I remember him saying, if I believed in God, I would be dead, because I would have given up. I would have not continued to crawl, because I would have thought, well, at least I can go to heaven. I don't have to go
Huh.
through this. Man, I mulled that over and over and over and over again. And then, and then on the other hand of that, right, you have the saying, super famous, everybody's heard it. There are no atheists in a foxhole, right?
Right.
You know, and that of course, came out of World War I, and has stuck around in the American ethos forever. And I think you even, we talked about leaning into humanity. I know a few very staunchly atheist people who I'm very close to, who I would say are calm and they're healthy. And what I have noticed is they also deeply push into humanity, which, like,
Hmm.
right, if you like, the Bible is the story of God's interaction with people, right? And you can look at other religions, whether you're looking at the Quran, or you can look at any of these tomes with the Buddhist teachings, and ultimately it is about saying, how do I get in touch with this person and connect with these other people, right? There's like
Oneness.
me and there's us, right? And so
Yeah.
I think, sure, like you can be at peace and be healthy without a faith, but I think it's probably a lot harder, right? Because faith is what teaches us, right? Ultimately, faith isn't so much teaching me about God as it is teaching me about me and what I can and I can't control. And the only thing I can control is me, and I can't control anyone else. And I have to leave the rest of that up to God. And the way that plays out in my life has been the teachings of Jesus. I think plays out for people in a lot of different ways. And those are the people, I mean, we're still feeling like complete tremors of COVID. There are people who will never recover. And
Yeah.
I don't mean physically, like we're learning about long COVID. We're learning about chest issues or what may or may not, like for me, my wife's a nurse and I have a company that does a lot of work with nursing homes. So like, I mean, I was vaxxed the first day, you
Oh,
know,
uh-huh.
this wasn't even an option. This was, this is like, we're
Yeah.
dealing with old people,
Yeah.
and the funny thing was, it never, ever for us was, you're vaxxed, you're not vaxxed, you're good, you're bad, you're whatever. It's not, we're learning so much. We're learning so
Right.
much about vaccines. We're learning so much about sickness, right?
We,
And
we learned so much about fear.
that's right. And there's so many people who just couldn't, and who still, I think, just can't enter into it. Doesn't matter, right, who you think you should vote for, or who you think should vax, or whether you should wear a mask or whether you shouldn't wear a mask. What should always, 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 always matter is, how do I interact with the other human beings who are around me, and
Yeah.
like
Kindness.
love myself and love them. And what does that really, really look like? And I think when you see people who have dealt with COVID well, those people learn to press in to other
Mm.
people, even when they were isolated in their home.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I don't know.
Well, Rob,
No
that's
psychiatrist.
such
That's
a good ending note. I want to give a shout out to your businesses that you're in now,
oh
the
goodness.
Alderman Group. Yeah. You're a
Absolutely.
CEO of a creative agency, the Alderman Group.
I
They're
am.
in,
Yeah.
yeah, they're in Cleveland, Tennessee, and founding partner of Social Joey media content company.
I did. I found it. I don't run that one. That one's sold to the Yellow Pages. We don't own
Oh,
that one.
cool. Cool.
But
Well,
it was
congratulations.
a good run.
And you're still making music and have an album that you're getting ready to put
I
out,
do.
right?
We'll have an album out soon. My band is called Rob Alderman and the Unfortunate Return.
I
And
love it. I love it. And if somebody wanted to connect with you, how can they reach out?
I'm Rob Alderman at everything.
Okay.
I'm Rob Alderman at Twitter. I'm Rob Alderman at Gmail. I'm Rob Alderman on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram. I took all the Rob Aldermans.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I am so happy that we have remained friends all these years, and I expect that we'll double that easy, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much
much.
for doing this. It was
Thank you
awesome.
for having me. You have a lovely podcast, and really, your listeners are lucky, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
All right. Love you. Take care.
All right, bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.